Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton rancangan Agenda AWANI tapi rakaman khas di Bali, Indonesia. Kali pertama Agenda dan saya berada di sini untuk memubual satu sektor yang cukup penting, iaitu startup ataupun syarikat pemula. Untuk itu saya ingin minta izin berbicara bahasa Inggeris. I would like to thank my NAF for allowing Agenda AWANI to be here, right here in Bali at Area Duta for the fourth award. This award is very crucial, an award that looks at the whole region for startup. You know, it's called the ASEAN Rice Bowl Startup Awards, and this is the fourth time. It's for the 2018. One of the names that have been early on associating itself with this kind of effort and movements and also linkages from the outside of the Nusantara is Kim. Kim is right here beside me today. If you remember, he was in the studio before with me a few years back, and we were talking about GSA, the Global Startup Awards. And Rice Bowl and GSA are friends and partners in the business term. So I would like you to maybe give your views to this award, and also for the first time ever the summit, I think. And where have this matured to? You know, you've seen it in inception, you've seen it in its early start at the startup ever. So if this was a startup, what series would it be? Do you see the unicorn for the ASEAN Rice Bowl Startup Awards?
I really see the development as we have also seen in the other regions. So Global Startup Awards is the umbrella. It provides the framework, the branding, but also the cross-regional connections. So we have juries from the other regions, we have access to investors and so forth. And the development in ASEAN Rice Bowl Startup Awards is the same natural development we have seen in the other regions that we are present. So everything started in the Nordic region. When we started 6 years ago in the Nordic, it was kind of also a bit immature, the startup ecosystem. So let's say as it was here two years ago.
Okay.
And how it has matured here in Southeast Asia is really an indicator of how technology and startups is a unifier. Because you can see here today you have really, really interesting high-end people from the whole ecosystem in Southeast Asia. It's even possible to bring in people from outside Southeast Asia to participate, all in the name of innovation and technology. And basically, what's happened in the world is that technology has tear down the borders and connected the people that has always existed around the world, that has a desire to make impact and to create, and are not waiting for politicians, they are not waiting for things to change, they take matter in their own hands and they're doing it. And I think the beauty of Global Startup Awards and this global ecosystem is that we're basically just connecting the dots. So you can say that Global Startup Awards is our vessel. We use human needs or human things to connect people, because competition is something that everyone can refer to. Recognition of hard work is something that is important for human being in general. And we use that as a vessel to create this global network and these events where people can actually shake hands. And people that has very different cultural backgrounds, religions, and upbringings, they connect instantly around technology and innovation. So we have a vessel, and from that vessel, which is now covering 7 regions, everywhere from Africa to Asia to most of Europe, we can build other services on top of that is helping all our stakeholders, market entry, so forth.
I'm going to go there, market entry, conversion to actual partnerships in value terms and stuff. But before we go there, this is Bali. You know, 400 to 500 years ago, many bigger powers than Bali wanted to run the roost over Bali from just beside the straits. Javanese, big superpowers of the old empires, right up until maybe 300 to 400 years ago, when the first white man from Europe came all the way, and the Dutch in particular have always been coveting Bali, which led to the final resistance, as many say it, when one of the kings of Bali actually committed mass suicide. But this is the era in the 21st century of the fourth industrial revolution, where yes, disruptions are still disruptive, but many white men and women now come to this site also with by handing out partnerships and collaboration, no longer like the very one-sided, lopsided of 400 to 500 years ago. So from that perspective, I'm going to ask Kim, because from the opening by Ibu Lily to Pak Dafian's speech to my first fireside chat, the central theme has been focusing on this is a small, relatively cozy ambience where it's more a meeting of friends, not just dollars and cents and business. And I think that fit very much into the psyche and values of Bali and even the rest of Southeast Asia. If you have to look at it from that side, you know, it's not just monetary gain, it's not just dollars and cents and black and white, but Southeast Asia, with more than 600 million population, this is about solving people's problem and connecting the dots.
And I think you're very right about that. Let's say today, for example, of course, I walk around and I talk to the finalists, and I would say almost all of them, they are driven by making an impact. So when they communicate what they do, they're often using phrases like, we want to help them to do that. Okay. We want to make sure they can improve this. If you go to Europe, sometimes the phrases are, we want to take over the market. We want to be the next unicorn. We want to destroy the market. So I really like this different way of communicating. And I think the reason they're communicating in different ways is because they have a different mindset. And as I said before, it gives power to the right people. Technology and access through the internet gives a possibility for people to actually do an impact, which was not there just 6-7 years ago. Yeah. So it sounds corny and it's been used so many times in history, but we really live in a unique period, I think.
How does this kind of input, you know, influence or even evolve the bigger global startup awards platform? Because the lessons learned from regions like this, with its diversity and uniqueness, vis-a-vis what's happening in the Nordic part or even the African or whatever else, what would the cumulative effect be for the global scene?
We can learn from each other. So the flip side on this ecosystem that has developed a lot, let's say in the Nordic region and parts of Europe, there are some learnings from this development that can be brought into this region and ensure that these companies that are doing this impact work and creating these new solutions, they have a better chance of surviving in the long term. There's also a chance to bring technologies cross-border. So if you take some of the technologies that I met today, or the founders representing technologies that I met today, I can see an application in their technology in other markets. And I think to take founders from Southeast Asia into the European market, for example, I think it would be like really, really refreshing for investors to meet these kind of founders.
Share with us some stories. You know, I want to help the audience maybe imagine if you can illustrate some examples where the power of global network across countries, across regions. Because at the end of the day, technology is for the betterment of mankind. It's up to us how to use it. But more and more the startups that I've met, especially in this platform, like you said, it's about trying to have the power using technology to make a change. But it will be refreshing if you, from the other side of the world, the colder side of the world, in the Nordic areas, can see the warmth and the light that is fusing out from Southeast Asia, reaching out to Europe and maybe even Americas. And the great things happening from there, from that meeting of points and that spark.
I think we are in the beginning of a new era where the technology is going that way. So I think if you take it from a global startups perspective, I can give you an example of a company that went from the cold region to the Asian region. It's a company called Truecaller.
Okay.
And basically, they did not intend to be big in Asia, but they developed a simple concept, which is basically a lookup service. When people call, you can kind of detect who they are.
Okay.
But that took off completely unexpected in India, and now that technology has transformed into an ID indicator of who you are.
Okay.
So governments are even using this technology to identify people. For example, in India, you don't have the same technology on a government level to identify people. Now Truecaller has been implemented in some cases as an identifier of who people are.
Mm-hmm.
So here you have a strong connection of technology transfer to that way.
Okay.
And I am very much motivated to take technology from here and bring it to
Correct.
the other parts of the world. And I think that's a beginning that's happening now.
All right. Well, Kim, at the end of the day, it's not called entrepreneurship for no reason. It must bring value, both social, economic values. So I want to, for the business managers out there, so I want to ask you that part in that conversation during dinner or lunch, conversion rates from initiatives like this. You know, if companies and CXOs of companies were to decide, yes, let our executives or whoever in our organization go to these kind of platforms and meetups, then it has to make that point where it's worthwhile, business-wise, to do this. And like the piece of information I want to glean off the dinner we had, the pre-dinner, there's a company in China that spent millions of US dollars just to connect and network around the world because they're big in China, but they're now trying to branch out. So can you share with us how it's not just an award, it's not just a summit, but the energy of collaboration from there and the meeting points from there, the friendship from there, can actually translate to real business imperative that will in the end lead to that millions or billions of US dollars?
As I mentioned in the beginning, I see Global Star Wars as a vessel. And that vessel can be used to have these products on top, which is value creating for the stakeholders. So one group of stakeholders is obviously the corporates that are providing services that are relevant for the startups or interested in investing in startups. So for example, we are doing a lot of matchmaking. So from the data that we collect in the different regions, Microsoft, for example, is looking for AI companies to put into a program, to learn from them, to give them special support, to give them extra technology support in developing the IT infrastructure, connecting it to Azure and the AI technology that's in that platform. And that is like a matchmaking thing happening a bit behind the scene. Then you have another stakeholder, which is really important in the ecosystem, is kind of the king on top, is the investors. The investors are needed to make the companies grow. And what has happened the last 5 years is that 5 years ago, everyone was talking about Silicon Valley. That's where you go. This is where you get your investment. Where I see the investment scene is becoming fluid in a different way. So what we are looking into is creating funds together with the existing funds, creating sub-funds that are focusing on different emerging markets. For example, in Africa, create a fund together with a local stakeholder. We might bring in some outside investors as well. And that fund will only invest in companies that can do social impact in Africa with technology and be a good business as well. But it could also invest in market entry companies that has maybe some kind of advanced technology relevant for African agriculture, let's say, for example.
Okay. If you look at it, there's the consumer part, there's the entrepreneurs part, but there's also the government side. And I've picked up conversations around the halls here where a simple thing in the old days and era of the 20th century is visa. documentation just to enter another country.
Yeah.
Even that can be a big stumbling block
Yeah.
to the next solution, like Meditech, medical technologies for the marginalized.
Yeah.
So how do you use this kind of platform? Because it's gaining power. I can see it from the very first time I saw this, to convince, lobby, or even partner one of the still big remaining institution in any country, which are the governments, to look at this. Of course, people are saying that's why Silicon Valley happened, because governments can do it. But at the end of the day, this is about collaboration, partnership, and if they're not in it, then a simple thing as not getting visa can stop somebody from actually solving problem for millions of people.
And I think this is still a really existing issue in many ways. But still we see a clear development that the governments are way more interested in this startup environment than just 5 years ago. And that's not only in the Nordic or in Europe, you see it in Asia as well. You see it in Malaysia. There's a huge shift compared to the first year we were in Malaysia and until now. And I think that dialogue and that interest from the government point of view is a factor of many things. And I think that dialogue will also ensure more easy access to, actually getting a permission to create a company locally. And I think Malaysia also have a lot of programs that are making it easy to enter Southeast Asia through Malaysia.
Yes.
But you see that in many countries already.
Yeah.
But of course, some countries doesn't have the best relationships.
Yeah.
And you can say, for example, in a region like SAC, which we are present in, you're dealing with countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India as three of the different countries in that region. And of course, it's not easy for an Indian founder to establish a company in Pakistan.
Especially nowadays,
And that's the beauty of what we're doing. We are floating on top of politics. It's like politics are completely detached from this community movement. And the entrepreneurs are trying to float on top, but in the end, laws is law. If you are not permitted to start a company, you can't do anything.
The reason I'm asking is also, as you know, you've been a frequent follower and also visited to Malaysia in the last few years. We've had a change of leadership after so long. And maybe if new leaders are listening in to what you're saying, they can take a leave or two. Because when you're new, you need as much expert help as you can. And maybe it's also the worldview. In the old days, things are so compartmentalized, politics, economy, and social. But now with new technology, digital technology, there's even deep technology now, like deep AI and deep machine learning. The technical acumen cuts across in its outcome of calculations and interpretation across all sectors. And maybe I can't blame the politicians taking the other side, wearing their shoes. Maybe these political changes were also contributed by the change in digital technologies, like semantic analysis, social media, where people can governize. And I hate saying this phrase, but fake news, it's more talk about than real journalism, even though it's relatively new and it's not the main. But because of new technologies which enables that to flourish, then the focus is so much on there. So the hype of digital technology itself sometimes doesn't really represent the entire spectrum of the good that it can bring. Definitely. So in the political cycle of 5 years and winning the popular vote, where do you think, taking a leaf out of the more matured democracy in Nordic countries, which is more known for socialism, for example, to what's happening in mainland Europe, for example, with Brexit and everything, where do you think we in Southeast Asia can take lessons from there? Because otherwise, we're just going to be repeating the cycle that Europe has gone through. And I don't think the diversity, whether in Bali, Indonesia, or Malaysia, or anywhere in Southeast Asia, can really take that kind of left, far, and far right kind of division.
And I think it's really important to talk about the flip side of technology. Because as any tool, ever developed by humans, there's a flip side. And I think the flip side of technology is actually quite big if you don't really take care of it. So that's one story in itself. But what you can learn, if you want to have some advices from what I see is going well in the Nordic countries, is that they take it so seriously on the government level that they have these different organs where they invite in stakeholders such as people like me from the ecosystem, experienced founders, like a really diverse group of people, and they develop legislation suggestions. And it's not just PR, because it could easily just be some kind of thing you do before the election. No, it's actually quite serious, because it's about being competitive, and it's also about understanding, the threats. And I really believe technology will be our way of making the world better. Yeah. But I'm also not like an utopist thinker when it comes to technology. Okay. I know it can also go the other way, for sure.
Having said that, we have a few minutes left. Don't you think discourse is still utmost important, offline or online? Discourse has been one of the most pervasive channel, if we like, of communication, where people can speak multi-point to multi-point now. Google Hangouts or whatever is being used more and more, even in businesses. So, but how do we look at that in its entirety? Because it's so easy for people to stop new technologies because of a few bad hats, rather than see the 90% other that is good that can bring to the people. And the reason I ask is because in Southeast Asia, we are disrupted the most. Our economies are still developing, but the disruption of the fourth industrial revolution is already here. If you look at my industry, the media, I mean, even though we don't ask for it, but Facebook, Google, every other social media platform, and we are one of the most active users in this region of social media. Okay. So where do you think Southeast Asia should pitch its bet in that sense? Because we don't have enough resources to invest in everything. So we can only invest in a few chosen ones. So which area, which sector? And isn't that one of the key things that we can try to read from the Rice Bowl and GSA, where the winners are, might be where we should put in our resources into. That's why I'm linking it.
I think you should look at where you can create the most value locally, because that's where you have your market. That's where you can make a difference. And I think areas like farming, agriculture is really relevant in Southeast Asia. We see a lot of technology supporting farmers, even normal agriculture, but also shrimp farming, for example. You also see parts of Asia that has problems with the environment. So where technology can also be an important...
Okay. I'm going to interject there. You're from Europe, so you probably know that EU is trying to, because of protection of the natural ecosystem, there's an issue of them stopping palm oil from going in. But there are hundreds of thousands of families, if not more, that are dependent on the supply chain. So can technology be used to that? Because that's a direct example of Europe and Southeast Asia. The two biggest planters and suppliers of palm oil is actually Malaysia and Indonesia.
It's a very specific example, and I don't know anything about the industry, but my guess would be yes. Right. And I think it's also about creating new industries that are related to an existing, how can you say, an existing kind of industry that you already have, but try to innovate it in a way that is suitable for the new technology and maybe changing climate as well.
Because it's about solutions.
Yes.
Right? So I have 1 minute left. So what's the future for Rice Bowl and GSA and the whole friendship of startups? And where do you think we can go? Because there are bigger and more complex challenges awaiting for us out there.
The biggest goal we can achieve is to truly make this present all places on the globe, and truly make people meet in person. So we are talking about technology, right? We are talking about all these things. But no matter what, it's the personal relationships that builds the world. So we want people to come together, and we also want to, I really believe that Global Startups has a really important role to play right now, because we can actually influence the mindset of investors to think a little differently. For example, bring investors from the Nordic to Southeast Asia to invest in technology that can have a positive impact.
Thank you so much, Kim. Always
You're
a pleasure.
welcome.
Kim, the friend of Astro AWANI from Global Startup Awards, which is a very cool and strategic partner of the Rice Bowl ASEAN Awards. And we at Astro AWANI are friends to both because we work also with them. That's why you're watching this special recording of Agenda AWANI. And let's see what else we have. Keep on tuning in because Kim is not the only cool, great person at the Rice Bowl ASEAN Awards. Right here, the fourth one, the 2018 one in Bali. See you again.